So yeah, welcome to the Smooth Brain Society. With us today is Dr. Marianne Reddan. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, that's correct.
All the way from New York. So she is an instructor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And when this episode was a year in the making, and back then you were at Stanford University. So if you want to give us a little bit of the background on yourself.
Sure.
Because I have lost track of where all you've been in the while.
Yeah. I was a postdoc when we first started talking in Jamil Zaki's lab, which is the Stanford Social Neuroscience lab. I was there pretty much all of COVID. Like I started my postdoc there about 3 or 4 months before the COVID hit and we went into isolation. And then there was a mix of reasons why I wanted to get back to New York a bit sooner. So I'm still completing. I'm still a Stanford affiliate and finishing off postdoc work as I start this junior faculty position that has a very soft start in which I'm collecting pilot data for a little bit, and then once I get my first grant, I can then go on to tenure track and have my a more independent research line. So yeah, I'm in a bit of a no man's land right now.
Another side hustle per se, which Marianne does, is she hosts a YouTube channel and I think a podcast as well, which is also funnily titled Smooth Brain. So that if you're more interested in the video side of things, you should definitely look it up. Covers a lot of neuroscience topics, run by Marianne and her colleagues. And yeah, maybe we should start doing video stuff as well, but we'll see how that goes. Depends if there's demand for it, isn't there?
Well, I mean, for the reason why we did it was because I started it with friends during COVID because I was seriously isolated. I mean, I had just moved to the Bay Area and knew no one and was living far off campus and was I was craving some interaction. So the video was very important because I wanted to see people. We don't do it so regularly, you know. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted to branch into TikTok world, I think your videos will be useful.
I think we kind of already have, haven't we?
Yeah.
A little bit. But that seems to be where everyone is these days, so yeah.
Yeah, we really need to get more onto it. It's a bit of admin when you're a student, isn't it?
Yeah.
To try to find the time.
And it gets harder to find time.
Oh, that's very promising for us, isn't it? But shall we get into
I was just going to ask, what do you feel like your aim for the podcast was? What were you trying to, in terms of that psych communication?
For me or for Sahir?
Oh, no, for you.
Oh, sorry. My aim was to just have very laid back discussion where I can just kind of spitball ideas with people, hear other people's ideas, have informal fun science connections that also connect the research with people with lived experience or just lay people, people that have a really good sense of whatever the phenomenon is being studied in their personal lives, but didn't study it in a laboratory. So we can kind of have fun discussions to reconcile that. We have a couple of episodes on pain, which is something I research, and we've spoken with people that are pain patients. And so we get to see if our theories for how pain becomes chronic or how different social factors influence pain, which will be what we discussed today as well, if that actually made sense or if they felt like that was true in their lives, things like that.
That's really interesting because I do feel like sometimes academic research can kind of become a bit disconnected from real life or people's real life situations.
Yeah, totally. We did an isolation episode and we vented about our own experiences in social isolation.
Yeah. That's so cool.
That's real cool. Well, should we then move on to your research subjects then? Because you said you study pain. What in particular do you look at?
So I'm a neuroimager by training. So in my PhD work, I was in an affective pain neuroimaging lab, and I learned how to decode brain activity pretty much, especially in relation to pain and emotion, and how to like do that with like machine learning technology. I am interested in pain in a couple different levels. I am very interested in the brain activity that might be underlying like these affective components to pain. I think the reasons why that intrigues me is more about like mechanisms, about like how pain is constructed, how an experience is constructed, which may not always be so directly useful to a patient, you know? So then other things I'm looking at with pain are just also people's self-reports, reactivity to pain in their physiology or facial expression. And right now we're actually just collecting a lot of qualitative data to look at stories of people's experiences of resource exclusion at a time that they were in pain in a medical setting, and like just collect different experiences like that and see if people who experience a lot of exclusion tend to report worse pain conditions or high levels of pain.
Yeah, definitely. Are you able to give a bit of background for maybe people who don't know much about pain, or, well, everyone knows a little bit about pain, but how pain works in the brain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So where to start? I mean, okay. So I think my favorite place to start with is that there's an actual definition of pain that we operate with that took a long time and a lot of smart people in a room to come up with and agree upon. And it's basically like a noxious experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. And that's the really important part, the actual or potential, because it means that pain does not have to be this one-to-one mapping with a physical stimulus, like hurting you, causing you harm, or activating a nociceptor. It could be something with the potential to cause injury. And so that means you can experience pain without physical injury, without the peripheral input. So there is a whole line of research we could go through in terms of like how the peripheral input gets sent up as a pain signal, right? But then there's what we do in neuroscience and neuroimaging is try to understand how then it gets constructed at the level of psychology, of your actual experience in the brain, because the idea is that you can construct pain in the brain independent of whether the peripheral information is coming into the brain or not. So pain is in the brain, and we want to understand that, because things like pain chronification, it means that you've learned to represent pain long after the body has healed from an injury, and that can become a debilitating disorder. Like throughout your entire life, it could last with you. And so if we can understand how it gets like embedded in your experience, like independent of the body, we can then try to better, help or treat you if you start developing a pain condition after a serious injury.
Wow. So what are the different kinds of chronic pain conditions that people have? They sound quite psychological.
Yeah, there's so many different things that qualify as chronic pain. So chronic lower back pain, I would say, is a common one that's studied in our field. Knee osteoarthritis is another one. Migraines are a chronic pain condition. Those tend to be in a separate category from like the more bodily ones. There's CRPS, which is chronic regional pain syndrome. So yeah, there's also like tooth pain. There's whiplash injury. There's a lot of different types of pain. There's like kidney pain. But yeah, and then there's a whole wing of cancer pain. I should be honest and tell you, I hardly study the chronic pain. That's my more recent pivot. I'm just starting that kind of trajectory. I've studied mostly just the construction of acute pain, which is pain in reaction usually to a physical stimulus that's happening right now in the moment. And it mostly in like neurotypical healthy people. So just how a person who doesn't really have any other serious things wrong with them, how they are experiencing pain when we induce it in the laboratory, and then trying to scale up those kinds of models into the clinic. But yeah, I have some ideas on what I want to do with patients too. Once we start validating some things in the more accessible population. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So should we move to your acute pain research then?
Sure.
This. So what do you mean by just looking at people with acute pain and differences within them, or sorry,
Yeah.
between them?
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll zoom out for a second and say, maybe I'll say two things. When I was in grad school, I was very interested in emotion. I mean, I still am, but that's what I wanted to understand. How is emotion constructed in the brain? And I was in the lab that was studying emotion, but also focusing on pain. I would tune out during the pain stuff. I didn't think it was that interesting. But then I started learning that, like, wow, this thing that is pain that I thought was like sort of boring because I thought it was like a solved problem, is actually not a solved problem at all, right? Something that's so externally driven and easy to elicit, like pain, is impacted by so many complex things in our environments, that it could really shape the way you experience the same physical stimulus over and over again. So for example, one of the studies that I did in grad school looks at how experiences of social support can influence a person's pain experiencing. And so the social support was with romantic couples. And if your partner was holding your hand, you had a pretty good benefit, and have reported reduced pain and had less pain-related physiology. There were also alterations to people's pain-related brain activity related to the hand-holding. So there's this protective effect of hand-holding. We looked at two other types of support in that as well, just the partner being present versus being alone. And also this very specific type of gentle stroking that I guess we can see the video or not. I don't know. I could describe it in detail, but like we taught people how to stroke gently on their partner's arm in this like area that we mapped out that would activate C-tactile afferents. These are afferents that are found under the hairy skin of all mammals, pretty much. And they are tuned to gentle touch, gentle stroking. They peak their firing rate at 3 centimeters per second. They like low force. They even like the temperature of human skin. The theory of them is that they were part of evolutionary reinforcement of grooming behaviors, maybe, but they release like oxytocin and endorphins downstream. So I thought like activating those would change pain greater than the hand holding. And I did not find evidence of that in that study. Hand holding, if anything, was the best one, though, but like non-significantly better. So yeah, so that was like, I'm kind of all over the place there. But basically, the idea is that something as simple as we're burning people with hot plates, right? So think about this, like when you're holding a cup of coffee without a sheath on it and you want to drop it because it's so hot, your experience of that type of heat can be influenced by the people around you, how much you trust the people around you, if that person is showing empathic support and care, if you believe that you'll be able to escape that coffee cup, like if you're being told you're forced that you have to hold it, right? Like then you actually might feel more pain than if you have the option of dropping it, So I'm really interested in how these expectations for injury are influencing the experience of pain and how that's really getting ultimately embedded into the quality of your experience and maybe even your self-concept in a lot of ways, and just shaping the way that you navigate the world. And I guess the last thing I'll say about that is like when I was in grad school, I started looking at the rates of chronic pain and I like saw that it was just really negatively impacting developing nations much more than the richer nations. Within wealthy nations, you see like really high rates of chronic pain in working people, in poor people, in homeless people. You tend to see it more in women than men. You see it more in ethnic and racial minorities than in white people, though sometimes if they're like white working class men, they have it higher. It's like you see these different effects around, but I think like the thread that might emerge to explain a lot of these effects of like why some people develop chronic pain and some don't, is that some people are experiencing greater levels of oppression in certain systems, or like learned helplessness, and that experience teaches them you're not going to be able to access the healthcare that you need when you're injured, or this injury is because your workplace is dangerous and you can't escape this dangerous workplace, and that expectation for being injured again or for having a more serious consequence of injury motivates you to escape it. And in order to motivate your brain to motivate you to really escape this thing that it considers dangerous, which could be your entire workplace, for example, if you learn that, is to ramp up the pain signal. And so I think that could be, that's my theory. That's where I want to go when I start dipping into the patient work and the chronic pain work. I want to see if there's actually a learning component based on people's like complex socioeconomic experiences and experiences with like systemic racism as well. If that's impacting the learning in the brain that could contribute to the chronification of pain after injury.
Wow, that's so interesting. I didn't realize that this area could also be so social. Like in my head, I kind of imagined, it's just very biological, but that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's like what grabbed me, because you can really reliably elicit pain in a laboratory, and we have really good biological models about how your brain is going to receive that like nociceptive input. But then like we can do so much more work to figure out like what other systems are going to come online to modulate that nociceptive information, like kind of alter the value of it, and how is society involved in that modulation?
Wow, because I've heard people say everyone has like a different pain tolerance, but in my head I kind of thought of it as people are just generally more sensitive than other people, but is what you're saying is all these other factors that come into the degree to which people feel pain?
Yeah, I think it's still very much an open question. I mean, there could be some genetic component to pain tolerance. I'm not too familiar with anything or know of any really compelling evidence that off the bat. But in terms of like social roles and stuff, there's also a long history of really awful stuff in the conceptualization of pain in general, even in the medical field. Like medical doctors were taught that that Black people had higher pain tolerance because their skin is thicker or something like that. I don't know. It's actually not even like none of it is true, but like there's a whole study that like surveyed medical students and most of them reported that as fact. So there's like this deep, it goes back to slavery, right? Like, people had to rationalize why they would do something so awful and brutal to another being. And so part of that rationalization was, that they either, were able to handle more pain or that they were pain insensitive. So there's straight up lies that were taught as fact for a while that are in the air in the general ideas of what of people's pain experiencing is, that we need to unpack. But then there's also like how we interact with those beliefs, right? Because once like that's embedded in like the medical system, right? So now you have doctors who are going to just treat certain people differently the moment they report pain, right? So then people who get treated like that have to learn how to exist in that system to get what they need. Does that make sense? So then you start shaping the way you express pain based on how it gets you the help you need. So you can see these like sort of manifestations in social roles, I think, based on the way you've been treated by society, but may have, if you were in a different society and you had the same genetics, may never have manifested at all. Like the idea, I think that like women complain more about pain, right? In our study, I looked at gender effects, and there's also a history of only studying women for pain, which was like which was it's like sort of this like rebellion against a history from like 50 years before that of only studying men. But it's like, why aren't we just studying everybody? Even in the rats, they would only study one gender at a time. But yeah, so I didn't think that was necessary. So I alternated. I mean, I didn't have any restrictions on gender binary in my study either, or the couples didn't have to be heterosexual or anything, but the majority were. So that's just the way it worked out. And we would randomize who in the couple would receive the pain and who was the support giver. And I looked at effects of gender on the pain ratings and other dependent variables, expecting not to find a gender effect. And I was wrong for the self-reported pain. Women in our study report more pain overall than male counterparts, and they benefit from the social support more. You see really clearer effects in their self-reports. But when I was in that room as an experimenter, and like the women were pretty like normal in the experiment, and the men were usually squirming a lot, complaining very audibly. It's really interesting because it's yeah, but they were also, I think, kind of being threatened by maybe at some subliminal level of like having young female experimenters there, or their female partner being there and watching them experience pain, and they're uncomfortable, and then they would only use like a really small end of the scale and report little pain, even though they were really like talking to us and saying like how long is this experiment, or like yeah, I think I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but it's like there's like all these little nuances. And so people will express pain in different ways depending on the context and how it might help them in the long run. So all of those people in our study might express pain completely differently in a doctor's office, where it's like way more serious for what it means for their health. And it's a completely different sort of format of where you need to get care from, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really like the idea of context dictating how you express pain. I'm just taking it to a less to like a smaller example, which you see in sports teams. I feel like a lot of athletes probably hide whatever injury, even if they're in severe pain, purely because otherwise they don't want to be like left out of the team, or this or that, or they'll be replaced or whatever. So there's the incentive to not show pain then. And I guess there's that side of things, or at least not report pain no matter how ever you're feeling. So going to the other side of the extreme, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, which is what I think we usually train our men to do, especially like in military settings too, right? Yeah, I think that's so interesting, because then you have to think about like how many, like that level of repression, what that does. That kind of loops back, because what I was saying, like when people kind of say women complain more, I think it's just normal for women to talk about their experience, but it's not normal for men to talk about their experience, like in terms of just the way society has determined our roles like should be. And so I think like people might be experiencing the same level of discomfort, but some people may be more comfortable expressing it. And I think that helps them a lot of the time, as long as you're in an environment that, like makes it safe for you to be vulnerable, right? Versus like, yeah, if you're not expressing it, but you're still feeling it, I think that makes things worse. I have to think more about how that might contribute to chronic pain. It probably makes you isolate and withdraw, and that's usually like a real negative spiral for chronic pain patients, because it's a very comorbid disease with depression. There's a study, Headway would know Wani. He was a grad student when I was a grad student as well in Tor's lab. Now, Wani Woo, he has his own lab now in South Korea. He does really cool work. But he has a study where he looks at the brain mechanisms that are online for acute pain, but pain that's actually lasting for a few minutes. Usually when we induce pain in the laboratory, in order to do it in a safe way without actually causing tissue damage, we stimulate people for like no more than like 12 seconds. Like they're usually like 10, 11 seconds, something like that, or even shorter. And that's not very similar to pain when you're getting injured, if that makes sense. Like usually when you've had an injury, that pain is going on for a while, almost till it's healed. So Wani had a study where he puts capsaicin on people's tongues, and so it caused like a burning sensation without tissue damage though, but it lasts for a while. And he found that like the brain mechanisms that come on when the pain is sustained, so for a much longer time period, are different than the ones like during the quicker stimulation, and they're more similar to the chronic pain representations. And so one of the theories is that like the longer these like pain representations stay on in the brain, the more likely they get like embedded or like co-activated or just like kind of associated with other processes that may come on. So if you have like self-reflective processes, you could start embedding the pain potentially into like concepts of self or like self-rumination kind of things. And then later when you trigger maybe some negative thoughts or some of the things, maybe some meanderings that you had that were very useful to you while you're experiencing chronic pain and isolation, they may trigger the pain in the other direction later on. Like they might help bring back the pain experiencing in a chronic pain etiology kind of, because now those two things kind of learn to be associated with each other.
Wow. That's so interesting and very unfortunate. I imagine that's quite an isolating thing to go through. And something that I was thinking about was, it makes sense that people would withdraw if over a long period of time they've been trying to express, the pain that they're going through, but with no solutions from doctors or,
Yeah, and you might not be believed by your doctors, you might not be believed by your friends and family, or you might internalize it without even getting the feedback, like if you're someone like me, like people with like, you might like think like, oh, I'm such a burden on people. Like, I don't want to be a drag if I go out and I'm going to be in pain or too slow or like, and you might kind of cut yourself down without even the external feedback. You know what I mean? And, my advice to people in that is like, the isolation is a negative cycle and it's really bad. So if you can stop yourself from doing that, definitely do it, and maintain hope that like the learning mechanisms that underlie like the chronification can also be used for the reversal of it potentially. I think it's just a basic learning like process throughout the brain. I think it's something that's like redundant and used in a lot of different experiences and states. So it's like, it's not something that's like one and done, right? It's an active learning mechanism that can be used to unlearn it as well.
Yeah. And is there anything else you think that could help in terms of if someone is going through pain? Like I know the social support is one, but is there anything else in terms of what people can tell themselves or a certain state that helps?
Yeah. Let me think. It's so individual. So are we talking about someone experiencing acute pain, or are we talking about somebody who has like chronic pain after injury, or someone who's like on the cusp? They're like at 3 months and they're like, is it going to become chronic or not?
I guess maybe I was imagining like acute, like in my head I was kind of thinking maybe certain emotions may exacerbate feelings of pain or
Yeah. Okay, if it's acute, distraction. That's the most effective thing, honestly. I mean, I've looked at like effect sizes for a couple different things, mostly for like in chronic pain settings. Effect sizes tend to be higher in these like multidisciplinary rehab centers that like combine things like talk therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, also with like yoga, movement, and sometimes even creative work like art and stuff. So it's really like integrating a lot of positive things into your daily life with like movement and healing and rehab, right? But when you're looking at like needle pricks and stuff like that, like distraction is usually the best thing. And I think it's simply because it's you're just switching brain states. Like you can't always like experience like so many things simultaneously. So you're taking attention away from the stimulus. Though I don't think distractions like isn't something I'm be like, yeah, that's how you're gonna get through healing through your trauma or something. Like just for like small things in the moment. Otherwise, yeah, you're going to have to actually contend with it probably. There's like really cool work that we want to expand on looking at like early life attachment trauma and how that influences people's experience.
That's really interesting. So I imagine if you've gone through a more turbulent upbringing, then you'd feel pain more intensely to sort of,
Yeah, it's like depending on your attachment style, kind of, right? So people with secure attachment, who like didn't really like who are more easily understood and responded to by their caregivers, I guess, like and cared for, like attended in ways that were like really met their needs in the moment. They tend to have higher trust and like healthier relationships as adults. And so people with insecure attachment tended to have upbringings for a variety of reasons. One, it definitely is going to interact with socioeconomic deprivation. A lot of people who grow up in deprived environments lose their parents either from injury, or their parents work too much, or like the incarceration system could take somebody away from you, like, so you have, you have a disadvantage if your parent isn't even present. No less, if your parents are present and you're in deprived environments, there could be reasons external to your parents' personality, that could like create insecure attachment in the child because their needs aren't being met in a consistent way. And then also, obviously, if you have an abusive caregiver, then for sure, right? So if your needs aren't met in a consistent way as a baby, you develop insecure attachment, which influences your trust and makes you trust people less. Either you might overly rely on yourself, basically you learn different ways. You might learn ways to get attention from your caregivers that could cause problems in relationships for you later as an adult because that method doesn't serve you anymore. So like that lack of trust, I think, is also what's coming back because you might not believe that the resource you need is going to be there when you need it. And I think that belief is really what's influencing pain. So I think the attachment might lay out like a really strong like prior belief, and then other experiences with your environment, whether it's like discrimination based on race or gender or other factors of your identity in the healthcare system or beyond in social support scenarios, as well as like financial stress can influence it as well, because you can influence your belief for very valid reason, for a very material reason, that you won't receive care if you can't afford it or don't have insurance, right? Yeah.
True. Oh, can I ask then, because we've spoken a lot about how we would perceive pain and things, and you mentioned acute versus chronic pain activates kind of different brain regions when you were talking about a study. Could you tell us what regions they are? Just talk us through the
So acute pain, we have a model for it called the neurologic pain signature that was developed by my graduate advisor. And it's like this whole brain model that can predict someone's self-reported pain, usually to thermal pain, but it works for all types of pain, pressure pain, like pain, like visceral pain in the body. I think what other ones, shock pain it worked on. But it doesn't work on like emotional pain. It has to be like a physical type pain. And so the key regions in that like distributed brain pattern are like somatosensory cortex, the periaquetal gray, which is in the midbrain, the dorsal anterior cingulate in the frontal cortex, anterior insula is very important. You often see amygdala for that as well. If you want me to go into certain brain regions, just let me know. But then like the important shift that you see in the chronification of pain is a shift away from these sites of what we call primary nociception. So areas that are really getting the peripheral nociceptive input first. Like periaquetal gray gets a lot of that, and also as part of the dissension back for your body's response. Somatosensory cortex is, and the thalamus, right? Thalamus is obviously involved. Like these areas that are like getting the peripheral input and then like also mapping it so you know where it is in the body are kind of like these key primary parts, you start seeing a shift away from these primary nociceptive regions to ones that we would call like more affective or motivational. So other parts of like the prefrontal cortex and also like the basal ganglia, which are like value processing areas, can also be involved with movement. But nucleus accumbens is a really key player. So yes, you see this shift. So the idea is that the representation of pain is no longer depending too like primarily on these body parts, like body processing parts, right? And going more towards these areas that like have higher level conceptualizations of body and not body, well, body too, because like embodiment, but value and emotion. And I don't think like people have a have a really great sense yet of like all the the complexity of all the computations that happen in these areas. But yeah, the way I see it, and researchers kind of like David Borsuk see it, is that it's changing the valuation of pain. And then it might also be involved with maintaining that representation, because the expectation for pain is still present, and like expectancies can be encoded in the reinforcement learning circuitry that's like in the basal ganglia with the PFC. They kind of work together with that. That's something I really want to make actual like math models of soon, and start making tests of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you would describe what the chronification of pain is. So would that be the kind of changes that happen over time?
Yeah, I think it's something with that network that's altering the value of the nociceptive signals and doing something to keep them relevant long after the site is healed. So it's like some way of it to like keep activating like the descending modulatory pain system, like keeping it in your sort of conscious experience longer, like more in the brain, external of like of the periphery, that you're learning to represent it sort of as like as a state, kind of like, I don't know, I think about like any sort of I think any acute experience can become chronic. Like an acute experience of fear could very much serve you and is very survival relevant in the moment. If you hear like, I don't know, if there's like an explosion by you that causes like automatic fear and response, right? And you probably run away or duck or something, like you have that extreme experience and you survive. If that experience, that acute experience of fear, continues to stay relevant for you, keeps coding other experiences and memories, and gets integrated with your experience going forward long after like the bomb was gone, right? Or maybe you even leave that context that could have been a war zone or something. If it continues and it gets integrated to other aspects of your memories and cognition, you can develop PTSD. So you can kind of think of PTSD as like a chronic state of fear. I think the same thing with like, you can have an acute experience of like embarrassment, that if you keep ruminating on and integrating and coding a lot of other aspects of your life with, you can develop, I think, like chronic shame, like, which, yeah. So I think about that with maybe depression too, where I wonder, because there's like kind of cool work on depression being like an illness behavior, like a sickness behavior that like is happening long after like the immune response has ended, because like a lot of depressive like phenotypes are really similar to like a injured animal, like withdrawing from society, reducing like food intake, reducing energy expenditures, like hiding, like yeah. So I don't know. I need to go back. I need to learn more about that. But I wonder, like, you can maybe have this like acute sort of immune response or something that for some reason then gets integrated into your experience and like becomes like something chronic like depression. Yeah. Am I kind of making sense? I think there's a learning mechanism that underlies it that should serve the animal, because technically, like, if that mechanism exists, it had to work for you, right? Like, because ultimately whatever happened, like in the acute state, had to be so important, right? That it just caused like a tremendous prediction error. Like it was so out of your expectations for how the world normally operates, right? That it like, you just couldn't stop thinking about it. Like your brain had to be like looking all around and being like, well, is that going to be a bomb? Like, is this a safe, like, you know, is this area safe? I always thought this was safe. And sort of like kind of doing these like judgment tests now, and has to like recode everything because what happened was so dangerous and so unexpected, and your brain's entire job is to predict your world and keep you alive, right? So if it missed something that important, I feel like it goes into this sort of massive reweighting of like so many things to help you survive what it thinks is now a new world. Is what I think. This is totally my theories, and not, I've never done a study that I could directly say that's true. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
I feel like you'd have issues doing such a study as well. Having, I guess you could do self-report kind of things, couldn't you? People coming from, what do you say? From war zones and so on, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'm sorry, Olivia, you were about to say something.
Oh, I think while you're just saying that, I remember you mentioning like the expectancy of pain. Is it the case that sometimes people may experience pain if they're anticipating, you know, like there's the same stimuli that when they were in pain, do they kind of can experience pain even though they're not actually, there's no like tissue damage?
Yes, those are called nocebo effects. You can induce pain without having the injury. I can tell you a quick case study that's like a really fun example of that. A construction worker fell at a site, and a nail went through his boot, and he was rushed to the ER, and he was in like tremendous pain. They had to sedate him with fentanyl and midazolam before they could take the boot off. Like that's how much pain he was in. And as soon as they took the boot off, they found the nail actually went perfectly through 2 toes, didn't actually cause any injury. He was very lucky, but that man felt pain. You know, like it wasn't an act, right? Yeah, like your brain expected and saw like there is a nail through my foot, you know, like because the boot is on, but there actually wasn't a peripheral input to back that up, and yet it was a very real experience. Yeah, so we really do think that that pain is embedded in expectations for harm and not necessarily the harm itself. There's a researcher called Vanya Apkarian that really expands on this a lot, where he goes on to say that nociception, which is like, you know, like the peripheral mechanisms in the body to receive input that might cause tissue damage, like those are nociceptors. They warn you when something's getting too hot or pressure's getting too strong. He says that nociception's happening all the time. It's a passive thing that's always going on. Like that's part of how you experience the world, and you're not constantly experiencing pain or discomfort. He thinks pain is a completely separate psychological state that's really rooted in this expectation for, that is supposed to motivate you to make a really good plan to survive.
Yeah. So at least what I'm trying to understand is like it's a good mechanism to keep us safe. Like it made sense that he kind of, or that his body, in a crude way, his body kind of made that reaction to the nail in his boot because, you know, he probably needed help. Yeah.
Yeah, all the cues were there that he received a serious injury. Yeah.
Wow. That's so I wonder, I mean, I don't understand enough about neuroscience, but I wonder like how exactly his brain made him feel like that level of pain. I imagine it wasn't just like, oh, this hurts. This was like, this is so painful.
Yeah,
you know?
that's a really good question. Like, could he like just like, was he just feeling pain and fear, or could he describe like, I feel it in my foot, or I feel like a specific, I wonder if he like actually described it, if it could even match up to a description of someone who actually had like a nail go through their foot. Like I wonder how close the simulation might be. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Would any like research on as you said, nocebo effects. That's what you called it, right? Would
Yes.
any research on nocebo effects kind of give an indication of that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head if anyone's actually looked at like body representations for nocebo effects. That's a really cool idea. I wonder. I think some people might have done it. I've done some embodiment work where like we have people report where they feel sensation in their body when they see a certain emotion inducing image. So some of them are painful images, but most of them are like snakes, like IOPS images, or like something gross, like or there's like people playing and puppies, like all sorts of stuff like that. And I found that like I'm trying to simplify the analysis, but basically like the maps that people report in their body, I could find similarities in the representations in somatosensory cortex in their brain as they viewed the image, if that's making sense. And so somatosensory cortex contains a map of your body, right? So there's similar patterns in the self-reported body maps to the representation in somatosensory cortex. And the body maps are collected after viewing, so after we recorded their brain activity. So there was no reason like during the brain activity for them to be thinking about their body parts. They're just kind of experiencing passively the image. So the idea is that like most emotion exists, like also, yeah, if we consider pain kind of an emotion, a lot of the like they exist to ready us for the environment and help us navigate it successfully. And so some emotions like anger, for example, might ready you to fight something, and it might activate sensations in the body that would prepare your body to fight, like a fist representation is one idea, or like if it changes your heart rate, you might you might report changes around the chest. People tend to report different, they really report on the face a lot of the time. And we didn't collect too detailed like face information, honestly. But like hands, gut, are common ones people report on. Throat, you get throat a lot for sadness. Yeah. Does that kind of? I feel like I went on like a tangent, but yeah, it's the best I got.
Yeah, but it kind of gets into this idea. So yeah, nah, you weren't far off. Can I ask then? So this was in a way, because the images were kind of emotion inducing. Earlier you said, they were emotion inducing, and then they kind of linked it to body parts. Earlier you said that the theory which was designed, I forgot the name, but it didn't map very well onto emotional pain as it did onto the other physical pains. So what's the difference between the two in the mapping?
Yeah. Okay, so those are two different studies. I don't know if I've ever applied the MPS to the IOPS images. I probably have. It probably wouldn't work. I'm sure somebody's tested this. It's separate from a different one that we have tested on those images. So yeah, okay. So the signature that you're talking about that doesn't apply to emotional pain is the neurologic pain signature that was trained on predicting people's self-reported pain intensity while experiencing heat pain in that study, but it works for other types of acute pain. And people have tested to see if it works on rejection. So being shown pictures of somebody who dumped you is one of the studies. Things like that. Negative emotion, it doesn't work on, like negative emotion induction pictures. So it's not like it's specific to physical acute pain and like your self-report of pain intensity, but it's not. It's not really. Yeah, it's separable. It's separable from these other states in which pain could maybe be couched in, but. Yeah. So while I think that there's like shared mechanisms in the way that these sort of, how do I want to say this? Like these states are like kind of coding your world, and shaping the way you're going to explore the environment. I think that's like domain general, but acute pain is relevant for you in a very specific way that like seeing a picture of your ex-partner is not, or like experiencing a snake is not. Like these things are supposed to ready you for very specific action plans. And so it's not that, it's not picking up negative emotion, that signature, because it's picking up the pain. And that's because that's a process that's real and like explicit for you to escape the pain. But that doesn't mean that like you can't at the same time experience negative emotion. And it doesn't mean that those two things don't interact or like ultimately like shape each other like in the moment or later. Like, but that they have different action plans and also different peripheral inputs that are getting converted into action plans. Does that kind of answer it? This is an open question too in the field. People fight about this a lot, honestly.
Yeah, kind of. So I'm guessing that one was more predictive. So it's ready to, it's more a predictive pain idea. So how people would kind of perceive what's going to happen and what's going on kind of thing, right?
Yeah. That it's like an identifiable circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the emotion probably doesn't map on as well to it, but doesn't mean they don't interact.
Right. Yeah. And then emotion, I think, yeah, like are there identifiable circuits of emotion? I think we have to start reducing them to like survival relevance, right? And like their basic functionality, and then you lose a lot of like the complexity of an emotion experience, right? And then we're just going to get into a whole emotion debate. So, but I think it's important that we don't confuse physical pain with emotional or romantic pain, honestly, because if we actually did like react to like being rejected in the same way if we react to like, I don't know, falling on a nail, I think life would be like significantly harder. It's not that rejection isn't difficult, but like it shouldn't motivate you to like maybe it does motivate you to scream. It depends on how intense it is. But it shouldn't like send you to the ER, because it's gonna happen probably a lot more than like a real physical injury. It's a part of life that we learn how to deal with and understand the magnitude of. But I think, but I would imagine if you experience a lot of rejection in your life, your pain response will change, because that'll affect your belief about having social support and the care that you need when the bad things happen.
I think you put that so well. Do you mean that you would sort of become more resilient, or know where you need to reach out, or your kind of reactions in a similar way to pain? Like, I don't know, maybe knowing what you need to do as a reaction to that pain.
Yeah, I don't know. So I guess any adversity, right, has the potential to make you more resilient. Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, like, it depends how we define resiliency. And I think it also depends on how you conceptualize the adversity. This is like such a sticky thing too, that I really do want to get a good grip on as I start writing grants about these things, because I think the implications for treatments and larger policy change around health really hinge upon how we think about this, because you can learn through adversity, right? And you can become stronger from it, for sure. And if you perceive like your adverse event as a challenge and not something that is, the end of your life, kind of, you'd probably be better able to detach from it, learn from it, and move forward and find the best way forward, instead of like kind of succumbing to the stress of it and never getting out. But like, I think when we like do that, like when we start talking about an individual's way of like dealing with trauma, like how do you survive? Like that person's like the way that they found to survive, like not to like to be a happy human being, if they're even happy, but like to make it day by day, like, is so complex. But like, I think if we focus too much on that, we disregard the fact that people live in very different environments and experience very different levels of stressors and different levels of escapability to their stressors. And if we only focus on the individual's ability to handle stress, we're really doing people a disservice, because every system has a limit and a breaking point, and like there's a lot of people that live in environments that are like chronically stress inducing. If you live near a highway, your life expectancy drops. You are exposed to way more noise, which causes sleep disturbances, which can really affect your health. You're exposed to way more pollutants, like from the cars. Your house and windows get dirtier more often. You know, like there's just more dirt around that blows from the highway. So presumably you have to clean more. Like there's more stress and work added to your life just based on where you live, no less what's going on in the house, at school, at work, you know, all these things. And it's out of that person's control, and it's completely silent, like almost invisible, because then we're just like, oh yeah, like do some self-care, reconceptualize your environment. But like the highway's still there, you know? And honestly, there's way worse things. Like the racism is still there. Like there's, yeah, like the not having health insurance, like the inequities at work, like the labor struggle is still there. So so I think the answer is like twofold, because like I do want like us to like really like take seriously that the environment is inducing these problems, and it's disproportionately affecting people that are poor, pretty much, right? Like that's like the people that have less resources and less ways to advocate for themselves, and less education, because often they don't even know, like they're not being taught. They might not hear these conversations, right? That's why I think these kinds of podcasts are really important. Like people need to know that it even exists. And then say that they do know, they might not have a way out at all. So, all right. So then that goes back to the individual, because you don't want somebody to think like, shit, I'm never getting out of this, right? Like, because maybe that is true. Maybe that is what happens. And you should find a way to survive like through that, right? There should be meaning, even if that is the case. But if you do realize like your self-efficacy, which you do have, and you're able to organize with people around you who are also in the same terrible situation, you can come together and change things at a scale that you can't change on your own. So I do think the realization of yeah, I do think like your individual grit and perceptions of self-efficacy are so important. But also like we want to be realistic with the material world. And honestly, I think that's the dialectic your brain is resolving on a daily basis too. It's like your past experiences of how you've survived things and its current conceptualization of the world at hand. And then it's trying to predict for you the next move and if you'll make it. Like, what's the next best step? I forget the question you asked me. Sorry. I hope I answered it.
That actually covered a lot of things, though.
No, that's okay. I think that's why I like your work. It has a very, what do you call it? Yeah, like I said before, like a social feel to it, and thinking about inequality and lots of different aspects as well. So, yeah.
I think it's a lot closer to sometimes which we get in neuroscience research and some of the people we've had on, where like the research is almost very theoretical and it's very hard to place it in like actual social context without making 4 or 5 jumps first. But this is pretty direct. And
yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Can I just ask one thing, because maybe you touched upon it and I completely forgot, but we were talking about the socioeconomic disparities in perception of pain. Did we mention how they actually manifest in the brain? Like, do you see like lower activations in certain regions or things like that?
Don't think I answered that. I have super new data that's getting at this that I was trying to collect for a grant that I'm writing. So it should motivate hopefully me being able to design a study that actually tests this. But I asked like my former advisor if he had any data sets where he had like the zip codes of participants, and that so I could turn their zip codes into area deprivation indices or you can also use things like policy map to extract things about the socioeconomic environment and also about the pollution levels, noise levels, all sorts of things. But like how deprived one neighborhood is compared to another, pretty much. You can kind of put it on this metric. It's noisy, right? But it's something. And then I wanted to see if I can predict differences in people's pain responses based on that, and if there were differences in their pain-related brain activity based on that. And he gives me a pretty large data set, but it has all twins in it. And at first I was like, how the heck am I going to handle twin dependencies in this data set? Like, should I just throw out half the data set? It was stressing me out a little bit. And then I was like, oh, I'm just going to give in to the twins. This is actually a really interesting way to control for initial life conditions if they end up in separate. So I basically eliminated twins that I looked for twins, that ended up as adults in separate, different socioeconomic environments. Ones that ended up in a deprived environment and one that ended up in the enriched environment. So I don't know what the twins' initial environment was in any of these cases, but I have twins that one's classified as a deprived zip code and one's classified as an enriched zip code. And I compare their pain responses. Most twins end up in the same kind of bracket, to be honest. So it was a smaller data set. There were 49 twin pairs in this. And I found the twins overall in the deprived environment reported higher levels of pain in their self-reports than the twin in the enriched environment to the same exact pain stimulus, which is the heat pain. They have the same, there's no differences in them in their susceptibility to placebo effects. They kind of do the same. When I look at the brain correlates, it's weak, but I find activity in the brain areas that I really expected, which was primarily the nucleus accumbens, specifically the left side, if I'm getting that right. I hope I'm not messing up my laterality right now. I can double check really quick. But across all my studies where I look at the change in valuation of a negative stimulus, whether it's like the painful stimulus or threat of shock, you get the same lateralization in the nucleus accumbens for people's expectations for it or experience of it. If they're modifying their expectations for that negative stimulus. So the way I'm interpreting that is in line with my grand theory that I've been soapboxing about here. But the idea of the nucleus accumbens is calculating value weights and assigning them to different stimuli potentially, right? And that we can really get good mathematical models of that I want to start really going into and really trying to understand if that's actually part of the learning mechanism that's happening here, but that this area might be involved with weighting the nociceptive information then, and so that somebody in a deprived environment might have a prior of a prior in that region that says give a higher weight to nociceptive information is what I'm thinking, because their expectations are already set that this painful stimulus is going to be more costly to them than somebody in an enriched environment who maybe way more easily was able to get help and resources and turn off their pain, and they just learned it wasn't that costly. Does that make sense? Am I okay? So it's primarily the nucleus accumbens. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that's what I'm really interested in doing now. I was able to predict people's area deprivation indices from their pain-related brain activity overall without doing the twins, but the twins were in there, so I'm less confident on the results of that. And I want to do more validation of it. So that's a TBD. But that network involved nucleus accumbens as well as amygdala and parts of the prefrontal cortex. So, and it was completely separable from the NPS, which was the brain, the brain system that is representing the acute pain as it exists and your report of it. So, but they're simultaneous, right? They're coming from the same brain map, right? The brain activity. So the idea is maybe this other thing is happening, this other weird valuation circuit is happening that is interacting with it. And then somehow combining into your self-report, or maybe some readiness for you in order, I don't know, updating some learning or something for you to take action in the environment. Yeah. Does your audience care a lot about brain anatomy? Is that who's who's usually in here?
Our audience is really very general, so I do not know how much would care or know about brain anatomy. Therefore, when you were mentioning all the regions involved, I was just waiting for a couple which repeated a few times so I could ask you to elaborate on those ones as opposed to all of them. So like the nucleus accumbens came up now, especially in the study which you were talking about. So if you could talk about that a bit,
Yeah, right.
that would
Nucleus
be
accumbens.
cool.
I'm going to my slides to make sure that I got it right. Yeah, I like this is something I really need to develop a really explicit model for, because so are you familiar with reinforcement learning? So basically, like, you learn to associate a certain stimulus or event with a certain outcome. When you come to expect that outcome, you could represent the reward sensation before even receiving the reward. You can get that signal just by the thing that predicts it, sort of. And I think likewise with the nocebo effects, right? You might be able to elicit like the negative experience before even receiving the outcome because you've been kind of conditioned like that. That kind of learning is happening in the basal ganglia, which contains the nucleus accumbens. And so it's not completely clear to me how what circuits are like how the appetitive and the aversive circuits are like separating or interacting in this area. Like I need to I think it's not entirely clear in the literature, but it's definitely not clear in my head either. So I need to like learn more about that because the legacy of this literature is in reward learning. So I think it's the same sort of associative learning process, but I think it is different when it's reward versus something aversive like pain, a negative outcome. And that they might have separable circuits, but still within the same area. Because I think that area is then interacting with things like higher level, like hierarchical cortices further up, like the PFC, where like it's like helping to update weights up like all the way down, like all the way upstream, and then that also then starts to resolve like prediction errors in interactions between circuits from there all the way back. I'm trying right now and like failing to say clearly like the way predictive coding hypotheses interact with reinforcement learning. But the idea is like those prediction errors. So like prediction error is like you expected something to happen and it didn't happen. Right. And now you have to update your model because you were wrong. Right. So it goes back to like you didn't expect the bomb to happen. So you expected calm. Right. And then the bomb happened and you had a massive prediction error. So that's like a prediction error for that is something like you didn't expect to happened, right? You didn't have a model that covered it, but you can have one where you expected something to happen and it didn't, right? Either way, you have to update your model now because you were wrong. And that updating can happen at many, many, many levels of brain activity, like many different circuits all the way up and then all the way back down. And so like the predictive coding hypothesis says that that's like your brain is like resolving that throughout like kind of this whole circuit, depending on what your action is. And maybe like all that sort of recurrent activity too is like, is instantiating your subjective experience of the event. But also like honing your predictions for what will happen next, and that you sort of live in the prediction is also kind of what it says. And then within that framework, actions that you take in your environment are not merely like outputs, right? They are ways of gathering information to see if your model was correct, right? Am I making sense? Am I? I can't tell if I'm speaking clearly. Okay. You're nodding.
Oh, well, if you want to see if you're making sense, maybe I could try to break down what you said and you can be like, yeah, that's correct, that's wrong.
Okay.
So I think what I got from it was you say, so your brain essentially kind of like makes a model of like, this is yes, this is kind of like consistently taking like whatever learnings from the environment through whatever stimuli and is essentially creating a model in your brain which goes up at different levels within it functioning, and then again goes back down, and and therefore it learns to predict certain things which will happen if something happens in the environment, or and when it makes an error, it has to then update its model for that error, and that again changes how the model works. And yeah, so kind of a bit like AI, kind of a bit like ChatGPT,
The
I guess.
reinforcement learning algorithms are like they're shared with like both neuroscience and it's like its own branch of machine learning, right? Yeah, it's nice because it's like when reduced to like the single prediction error equation, it's very simple and elegant, right? But then when you think about all the networks throughout the entire brain that need to do these things and interact with each other, and and then weighting them, and you know, how big is the error? How big was your expectation? How much evidence did you have? Right? Like it becomes way more unruly and complex. But it seems like we effortlessly deploy that on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's incredible how complex the brain actually is. But I'm guessing that in all this, the basal ganglia's role in a way is to control that weightage of what's important, what's not on an initial level, because it's like lower in the brain in terms of like processing, or earlier in the brain in terms of processing.
David Borsuk talks about like these corticothalamic basal ganglia loops that are involved in pain perception. So yes, I think it's like, I feel like I'm hand waving when I say the basal ganglia too, or even nucleus accumbens, because I think a lot of this is like you have to get really down to like small bits of circuitry like within them, you know. But in general, I think like that kind, like somewhere in there, those computations are happening, and the primary areas that it's going to then like kind of output to or interact with during that processing are going to be like will be the thalamus and the prefrontal cortex. And then again, prefrontal cortex, right, is like also like massive real estate that you want to like, that does so many different things. So just saying that almost doesn't mean too much either, right? But we do know that that's like an area like that's downstream, and if you think like the brain isn't really a hierarchy, right? But it's like if you use the idea of a hierarchy, it's that like there's later stages of processing. So if you're later in the stage of processing, it means you're getting to sum over a lot more information, right? So it becomes a bit more abstract or symbolic at later stages. And it has the advantage, the later stage areas, which tend to be like, you know, the cortical areas, especially prefrontal cortex, like back project, you know, all the way back down, and then help to either like, you know, coordinate activity across areas, or change the weights in other areas, or bring on another area that maybe should have been on, or something, you know, like so. So it's like a hub as well as like something more abstract. It gets to take advantage of a lot more complex interacting information. Which is also why pain is a hard problem to solve, because you're not going to solve pain or emotion without ultimately solving consciousness. And maybe that's a debatable thing to say, but pain is considered, like, by definition, a conscious experience. Like, you have to be able to your self-report of pain is your pain. Yeah. Sorry, but then like that does open a whole other debate, because then you get people that say that babies don't feel pain and that lobsters don't feel pain. And then it's like, well, it's not that special. Like, I don't think. Yeah.
Ooh, the last thing on don't feel pain. Are there any reports that if any certain regions are damaged in the brain, people don't report pain or don't feel pain, kind of thing?
Yeah, so you can have known peripheral nociceptors. I forgot the name of this. Like congenital insensitivity to pain. It's a rare disorder. It's genetic. People with that die very young because they tend to do things that are actually quite dangerous and they don't realize they're getting hurt. Like, I think the number one cause of death for people with that disorder are burn injuries. So it's also like they might not seek medical treatment because they didn't actually realize how much it hurt, because how much damage it caused, and then die from something like that. But that's the peripheral areas are taken out. In terms of like what part of the brain can you stimulate to turn off pain, that's like $1 million question. There doesn't, I mean, I think different people will say different things here. I don't think there is an area, but people people try to stimulate subsections, I think, of the thalamus and the periaquedural gray to do it. Like, if you can administer like opioids directly in the periaquedual gray, I think, if I'm getting this right, and like block pain. And I think they do stuff like that in medical settings sometimes for certain treatments. But like, I don't think if you ablated the prefrontal, like the periaquedual gray, that you would not experience pain. Yeah.
Don't worry, it was just a
I
question.
think it's a good question.
Olivia, I remember you saying you need to head by 11, so should we be wrapping up? I think it's also an hour 15 we've been recording for.
Yeah, we could do our final questions or the quick fire.
Let's do it.
Yeah, if you're keen to do that, Marianne.
All right, go ahead. You can start, Olivia.
Cool. Oh yeah, so the aim is you just answer as quickly as possible, whatever comes to mind, and they're a bit silly as well. So, summer or winter?
Summer.
Cats or dogs?
I have them both. Cats. My dog is a pain. I love him, but he's very difficult.
Cats are a bit easier, eh?
Cuddle me and sleep on my head. They don't cause me any problems.
Movies or TV shows?
Movies.
All right. If your life was a movie, what genre would it be?
What genre is River's Edge? Whatever that is. It would be like some kind of like a dark drama, but there's like characters that are so over the top they're really fun to watch. I think that's
anyone in particularly you'd like to play you?
Oh, play me? I don't know. I want to say Dennis Hopper. I resonate with him, but I don't know if he could play. Is there like a female version of that?
Oh yeah. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I don't know. If I could like control my level of alertness, like sometimes I'm really sleepy and I wish I wasn't. To be more awake without it.
I feel like that's such a practical answer.
What's
something stupid someone's tricked you into believing?
Oh, I don't know. I'm so gullible. What is something stupid I believe? I don't know. Like, yeah. Let me think for a second. I don't know that my self-worth is based on my success as a scientist. Somehow somebody made me believe that. I don't know. But
yeah, wow. That got real quick.
Do you mean someone said that, or just a general feeling that you got?
I think it's it's definitely a general, like the way I've been reinforced in life. I think, like, yeah. By just getting deep in academia. I'm sorry, my dog is barking. I put him in his crate and he wants to get out. Yeah, but I think in general, people believe, right? We tend to believe that our ability to produce something is what gives us worth, right? And I think there's probably a lot more to be said about just being.
Yeah. What do you think is a saying that people say that you think is complete bullshit?
Anything about like free markets or like that the market will regulate itself.
You can't say that. You're American.
Sorry, do you want me to expand on that? Yeah, well, okay. How about this? That American people are, I think, are like don't like the government in general, right? They don't understand why. They don't know why they don't like the government. They'll give you reasons, but they don't really. Most people don't really know what's actually pissing them off or what's actually making their lives miserable. And that's by design. Where are we going? What right? Yeah. I can do my political thing if you want, but the U.S. has a terrible healthcare system that obviously like is, it just echoes deeper problems of systemic inequities, and we have the money to solve it, and it just never goes there, right? And now we see epidemics like chronic pain, completely preventable illnesses. The number of people that die of preventable illnesses in the United States each year is equal to 3 times the amount of people that died in 9/11. But we're not outraged about preventable healthcare deaths, right? We're outraged about things that are easier for us to see and then get sensationalized by the media.
Wow, I didn't know that stat. That's dark.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, next question. We can do another political podcast some other time. So if you were not doing this, so if you're not doing your research field, what would you be doing?
Oh my God. I think about this. Okay, my ultimate fantasy that would never happen. I would be like living on a farm sanctuary that like where we just rescue animals. None of the animals get killed. It makes absolutely no money, so there's no way this can happen. And I would just be tending to a bunch of animals all day and having a family and maybe teaching. Teaching high school.
That sounds so picturesque. That sounds great.
Yeah, you guys can come pet some rescue
exciting.
pigs.
We look forward to it.
Oh. And on that note, do you have any final words of advice for our listeners? Is anything you feel like getting out there into podcast land?
Yeah. Your pain, 2 things, I think. Also, because my mom has gone through a pretty serious illness, in which I think would have been treated earlier had her pain been taken seriously by medical professionals. Yeah, your pain, it is a personal experience. It's real, right? So, like, you're the one who knows it better than anyone else. So, if someone doesn't believe you, don't use that as information. Because they don't have, they're not privy to your internal life. They're missing the mark somewhere, right? So what do I want to say with that? Like, your pain is useful for you. Like, make it useful, right? It's a signal your body is giving you because it wants you to live, right? So try to understand it and use it. And if society isn't receiving it properly, like, you're not to blame. Just try to find a world or a group of people or a space that does receive it properly, and it probably does exist. And if it doesn't, like, I don't know, you could still create a meaningful life. You could probably write a book that people would really enjoy, or make art or something like that people think they understand but don't.
That's great.
That's beautiful.
I like that.
Really nice.
It's good. All right. So with that, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Marianne, again for joining us. Hoping to be on your YouTube show soon as well.
Yeah, we have to exchange.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Look forward to that. If anybody wants to contact Marianne, they can look her up on YouTube or literally Google her and she shows up. It's the easiest thing. And yeah, thanks, Olivia, again. Thanks for listening. And until next time, remember that your pain is useful, so know how to use it. All right, thanks.
Cool, nice summary.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.